It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc. In an era of chaos, confusion, and craziness, Ferenc is a voice for common sense. As a financial literacy educator, speaker, and entrepreneur, Ferenc cuts through the noise to help us understand how current events affect our money, economy, and our freedom. Now, here's Ferenc.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ferenc. Well, we have a lot of economic news to discuss today, so let's just start there. Our illustrious President Biden has come out and stated, touting his Bidenomics, and he was discussing how, trying to say that the economy is a good economy. And the fact of the matter is, literally nothing costs less today. Thankfully, most people are seeing that, recognizing it, that this is ridiculous. When he keeps talking about we're growing the economy from the middle out and the bottom up, lowering costs for hardworking families, and making smart investments in America. Now, he calls that Bidenomics. No, it isn't. It's a joke. Like I said, a lot of people say, what costs are you lowering? The average American right now is spending $700 per month more just for basic needs. We're talking food and housing than they were a couple of years ago. So it's just a bunch of BS. It's not true. And yeah, look at it this way. About 8% now mortgages, which we're going to discuss that. In fact, mortgage rates are now at the highest level they've been in 21 years. They're over 7%. And the Federal Reserve is still discussing and considering raising rates one or two more times, which means we could see 8% mortgage rates. Today, that doesn't seem so crazy. Well, I said that a year or so ago. You can go back to my website, yourpersonalbank.com. You can listen to this or any of the previously recorded shows, by the way. And I stated that over a year ago. And like I said, it's documented. It's there. So you could look it up if you want. I'm not making this up. I said I would not be surprised if we saw 8% mortgage rates, 30-year fixed mortgages for people with good credit in the next year or two. And here we are. We're up over 7 now. And I said that because, again, of the energy policy, as we've discussed this many, many times on this show, and the government overspending. By the way, a little sidebar note, I have to really give a shout out to some of my energy producer folks. I've had a few of them contact me this past week. In fact, one of the guys I was talking to this past week was really cool. He's a 30-year veteran in the energy business. He's the one that makes sure your lights are on and your air conditioner and heater run. And he said, I have a hard lift so many times talking to people why we still need fossil fuels and all the above to make sure we have cheap, reliable sources of energy, which are the sources of economic wealth, folks. It's plain and simple. That's what divides. That's the difference between a first world country and a third world country. Reliable, inexpensive energy. He even stated, you get it. He goes, if you realized how much, he goes, I don't think even you realize how much the regulators and the regulatory agencies have these energy companies tied up in knots and circles and creating delays and costs. He goes, his quote was, we could produce energy almost dirt cheap if we could just get some of these ridiculous regulations out of the way, and they'd be clean sources of energy. And again, I've said this so many times, diversification is the key. When you invest, you want to diversify in a number of different investments because that's what reduces risk. If one goes up, the other, one goes down, hopefully the others don't, right? It's that simple. The statement I say all the time is if I recommended to somebody to buy one stock, put all your money in one stock, what would your response be? And the answer would be, you're crazy. And I always ask, why? Well, there'd be too much risk. Well, we could say the same thing about green energy or any energy source for that matter. That's why I'm all on the above. If you put all your eggs in one basket, all energy sources have strengths and they have weaknesses. And if you put all your eggs in one basket, you're putting far too much risk into the whole system, not counting your, national security issues and higher costs that affect inflation and hurt poor people the most. Again, if you're for green energy, higher fossil fuel, reduction of fossil fuels, you are against poor people. It's full period. Stop. There's no two ways about it. So I want to give out a shout out to my energy producer folks out there. Hey, you've got a tough job lately. Keep it up, man. We need you. Stay hang in there. Hopefully we can get this country turned around and get the hearts and minds of enough people turned around and realize that we need fossil fuels, we need natural gas, we need nuclear, we need solar, we need wind, we need any other geothermal, you name it, any other reliable source of energy, and if it's commercially viable and it's relatively clean, we need it. And if the more of it we have, the cheaper it would be, the better it would be for the economy, and the less inflation we would have. But I got off track there a bit. My point is simple. Biden boasting about a better economy is just a flat out, total, and complete lie. The one thing that they keep pinning their hat on, so to speak, and the one thing where the economy is still holding up relatively well. We haven't seen the strong recession yet that I still believe is coming, and I'll share with you why more in the show. There are a number of indicators that are telling us, and I've got another one to share with you. In fact, if you didn't listen to the show I did a couple of months ago, where I discussed a number of leading economic indicators, and I pointed out that a number of them, I pointed out like 5 or 6 of them. Some are more well known, some are less known. But the point I was making is every single one of these leading economic indicators are all pointing to a strong recession ahead. And the key is every single one of those indicators have never been wrong or only been wrong once, ever, over like 50, 60, 70-year periods. A lot of them are 29 for 30 or 31 for 31 times in a row. Right, correct. The point I was making in that show was this, that if we do not have a hard recession, every single one of those indicators, those leading economic indicators, would have to be wrong, some of them for the very first time. Now, statistically speaking, what are the odds of that actually occurring? It's close to zero, folks. It's close to zero that we would have a situation where these indicators, leading economic indicators, try saying that 3 times quickly, some of them which have never been wrong, keep going, would be wrong for the first time ever, and all of them being wrong. That is just almost inconceivable. In fact, I just went to the website, yourpersonalbank.com. It's a show I did aired at 5/23/23, so May 23rd. So if you go to yourpersonalbank.com, you can click on that. You'll click on previously recorded shows, scroll down to the May 23rd show. Economic indicators are warning of an upcoming recession. You don't agree? Listen, then decide. Well, I've got another one for you, folks, and that one's called GO. Now, GO, what is GO? Most people are familiar with GDP, gross domestic product. That's something that we hear the media talk about a lot, the politicians, you name it. GDP, gross domestic product, or GDP, a measure of total spending of the economy. It's essence of how much consumer spending or how much is produced, in other words, in consumers spend or buy, right? So how much stuff we produce, right, and buy. It's only a partial measure of the economy. There's a better one out there. And why it's only a partial measure is it really only measures consumer purchasing. So many times, and even I've been guilty of saying this, that the economy is 2/3 consumer spending. Well, if you just count GDP, that is correct. But the reality is consumer spending is not the cause of a good economy. Most people have this mixed up. Many politicians have this mixed up. Cause of a good, strong economy is business. GO is a far better measurement, and a GO really is gross output. It's also a government, the government measures GO also, and it measures it in terms of as a total output. And the key to this about GO versus GDP is GO measures all the business investment that happens all throughout the year, right? And so what it does is it takes into consideration, we've all learned that the supply chain has been a challenge, obviously, with the shutdowns, the COVID shutdowns and all that. So if there's a product or service that, let's say a consumer purchases, there's often many steps involved with many different businesses in purchasing and manufacturing parts or pieces. Let's just take a car, for example. Think about all the different pieces and parts and companies that are involved in creating that car, and all the economic activity there is with the different businesses just to build that car. GDP only measures the car. and the consumer purchasing the car. GO, gross output, measures all the businesses involved in making the tires and building the engine and building the body and all the other pieces that go into, building a car. So it measures all output or all economic output. Again, a far better measurement of economic activity because it includes business activity. And by the way, GO is more than twice as large as GDP. In other words, when you measure all economic activity, businesses actually spend more than consumers. They're a bigger input or driver of the economy than consumers are. And here's the warning. Here's, like I said, the leading economic indicator. GO can act as an economic indicator, obviously, like GDP can. GO has been down about 9% the past 2 quarters in a row. It's not saying we're in a recession yet, but that's a bad measurement. That's telling us that the economy is most definitely slowing down, and we are likely heading towards a recession. All the other leading economic indicators, like the yield curve inversion and things like that I talked about in the May show that I referred to earlier, go to yourpersonalbank.com, check that out. If you missed it, strongly recommend that show. It's one of the best ones I've done in a while, and I know I'm biased, but it really was. I got a lot of feedback on it. My point is simple: GO is showing us, it's one more leading economic indicator telling us that things aren't bright. Things are not looking good. Let me give you one last one before we run out of time. I've seen some studies that have shown the one bright spot, of course, has been consumer spending. It's one of the reasons why the upcoming recession that most economists, most experts agree is upon us or ahead of us. Moody's pointed that out even recently. I've discussed that. Has been delayed because of consumer spending, and the consumer spending has been going on because of all the money the government helicoptered into the system, right? I've seen a number of studies showing that the median average household will run out of extra COVID dollars or extra savings in September of this year. Folks, that's next month. That's coming up that's right around the corner. In other words, more people have less savings than they did before the COVID. And that's been the one bright economic driver of the economy for this past couple of years, at least. If you're waiting for another shoe to drop, that's the next one that's probably going to drop. And let's face it, with mortgage rates surging over 7%, probably headed towards 8% soon, that's not going to be good for real estate market either. Look, if you want to navigate this and learn how to thrive in this tumultuous economy, what we're dealing with is uncertainty. You want safety, guarantees, reduce your taxes, get positive arbitrage, contact me. Be happy to help you. Stay tuned in the next segment too, because I've got some more very interesting news, information, some economic stuff you're not going to want to miss.
Stay tuned for more common sense from Ferenc. For more information, contact Ferenc at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth. Want more information? Contact Ferenc at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ferenc Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ferenc. So in the last segment, I was discussing another economic indicator that's not very well known, GO versus GDP. GDP is gross domestic product. GO is gross output. And if you missed it, go to yourpersonalbank.com, listen to this or any of the previously recorded shows. You can listen to them anytime you want. Each has its own topic. So like I said, you can always go there. But one last thought on GO or gross output. Like I said, GO is more than twice as big as GDP. GDP really just ignores business-to-business sales virtually. It's really more about, it leads almost half the sales of our economy. GO, actually, gross output, measures business investment and entrepreneurship. And when you look at GO, you realize it's business investment and entrepreneurship, not consumer spending, that are the catalyst for economic growth. You see, consumer spending is the effect, not the cause of prosperity. And a lot of people economically have that backwards. So hopefully that's maybe a little eye-opening or educational, help you understand our economy better and why, as I keep stating, and many economists are stating, experts, that we're headed to a recession, but it's being delayed because, well, the one area that's been propped up is consumer spending because of all the government money that was helicoptered into the system. But that savings is rapidly drying up. Consumers have been spending money, there's no question, and they're running out of extra savings. I'll give you another one. Consumer debt, obviously credit card debt in particular, has now hit an all-time high recently. Over $1 trillion of credit card debt now the American consumer holds. That is not good because that's really high interest rate debt, folks. And if somebody's got a lot of credit card debt and now they're having to pay high interest rates on that, that really curtails their ability to buy and purchase and be a part of the economy. And that's going to hurt people. So these high interest rates, by the way, they keep talking about how inflation is lowering. Look, everything's more expensive. Yes, the rate of inflation is lowering, but that's just a mathematical trick that the government and the administration wants you to not realize. Yes, of course the rate of inflation is slowing down because the rate of inflation was so high last year. For example, I believe it was June of 2022, where we were having a 9% annualized inflation rate. According to the government, it's about half that now. Of course it is, because they're measuring this year's numbers off of last year. And last year went up so far so fast, of course it's not going to go up another 9%. If you understand compound interest, that would be the second 9% would be far greater of a rate of increase than the first 9, okay? And so a slower rate of growth off of a higher number can still be just as bad. Yes, inflation is less bad or not as bad as it was a year ago. That is a fact. And they're bragging about that, but the reality is it's still very, very bad. I did another show on this recently where I was discussing what you need to look at is what is the rate of increase over the last 2 years. And those numbers are ugly. For many things that people purchase, we're looking at 30 and 40% increases on things like food and fuel and whatnot over the last 2 years of what they were spending 2 years ago. Again, a better measure is the average American is now spending just over $700 per month on food and fuel, the basics of living, than they were just 2 years ago. Folks, $700 a month might not sound like a lot, but for the typical American, that's a pretty big deal. Especially when you look at the average income is around $56,000, the last I saw, something in that range. An extra $700 a month, that's about over $8,000 a year more increase, okay, of spending for just basics, basics necessities. Folks, that's more than a 10% increase in expenses for the average American household. That's a big deal. And of course, right now, unfortunately, inflation is kind of been baked in. Even the Fed is not trying to slow it down as much as they should, or their stated purpose of 2%. They're even saying now 2 to 3 is fine. That's not good for the average American consumer. The average American. We'll just put it that way. Now there's some other things that are going on, and even some causes for encouragement. I think last week's show I was sharing reasons to be frustrated and then causes for encouragement, and that's again really where we are as a country. We really are divided, again, not in the way that many people think we are. We're divided in a way in terms of societally how people do they want to be in a land of opportunity or a land of dependency? That's where we're divided, folks. But I'll give you an example. There's another reason for concern, but cause for hope. So a San Francisco retailer, I should say, I guess they're a luxury department store called Gump's. They've been there for over 165 years. They're San Francisco staple. They're like a luxury department store. Well, they're getting really frustrated because their shoppers aren't coming into downtown San Francisco to shop. Can't say as I blame them. due to the crime and the issues. Even I think a week or two show, I shared how even the U.S. federal government is recommending that their own employees, the federal employees, not go into the federal offices in San Francisco, as they stated, because of crime. So even the federal government is admitting that crime is bad in San Francisco. So this Gump's department store is now threatening to move out of San Francisco and close after being there for 165 years. That's what's not news, because we've heard about other stores closing in places like San Francisco. What I thought was interesting, though, is the CEO. He's challenging the leadership in San Francisco. Apparently, Mayor Breed is the second highest paid mayor in the country, and of course is failing miserably if you measure her in terms measurements in terms of doing her job to keep crime down and do the things that most people would normally think a mayor should be doing. Now, if you're a communist or a Marxist or a socialist, then you probably think she's wonderful. Okay, I mean, that's just what it boils down to. But as he stated, he goes, it's sort of lunacy to live in an environment where you go to work every day and customers can't come to your store. I mean, it's just not a normal operating environment. And so he said he's challenging the mayor, says, let's swap jobs for 180 days. Let me be the mayor and you be the CEO of the company. And he goes, I'll only take $1 salary. And so the city will save a bunch of money. He says, I'll bet you in 180 days you would see dramatic change. I believe him. I believe you absolutely would. What it does is it brings the issue to a head. It really makes a point, because it's so ludicrous, those policies that San Francisco and these other liberal cities are pursuing. It's ridiculous. He goes, it isn't a mystery. It's not complicated. He goes, even a monkey can actually look at the facts and see what people have done. And he actually took a full page ad out in the paper, making a big deal of this. Again, that's important because it's education. It's people who like this, who maybe aren't necessarily that politically involved. This is a CEO of a department store, for gosh sake, who's now been forced to deal with the political issue of, like he said, so he has I guess another company or whatever he's CEO of. They have their wholesale center is in Salt Lake City. He goes, he says, I assure you, Salt Lake City doesn't have these kind of problems. They have a homeless issue, sure it does, but it manages it differently, and that's where the problem is. So anyway, the point is, people that aren't normally politically active or that involved are starting to wake up, because these political issues are getting thrown in their face and they're being forced to deal with these issues. Now, I'll give you one more here that I think is again, a cause for concern and a reason for optimism. I didn't even heard about this one until recently, but apparently there was a Catholic farmer who in 2017 in East Lansing, Michigan, was booted from the farmers market because he had traditional views, which basically followed the teachings of the Catholic Church. Okay, so he was banned. This is all the way back in 2017. So this goes way back before most of us, including myself, were paying much attention to what our government was really doing. And he posted on Facebook that he follows the Catholic Church's teachings on marriage, which includes opposing same-sex weddings at his family's orchard. Okay, and so the East Lansing officials banned him from the farmers market. He just won his court battle. Now it took 6 years. The good news about this is he did get an injunction quickly that forced them to not implement the ban, so he's been able to sell his goods at this farmer's market all these years. But he did just win his court case because it was religious, on religious grounds, obviously. But what's crazy is his farm isn't even in East Lansing. He lives like 20 miles away. It wasn't even in their jurisdiction. And folks, it was a farmer's market, for God's sake. I mean, really. He's just selling fruits and vegetables, okay? What is his religious beliefs have to do with selling vegetables and fruits? I mean, come on, you know what I'm saying? It gives you an idea of the police state actions that these people are taking, the anti-democratic, anti-constitutional actions that these people, oh my gosh, it's crazy. And like I said, I've shared this on the show so many different times, but I used to think, and I think there's still some people out there like this, it's getting fewer and fewer, but I used to think, oh, that'll never happen, or this will never happen, or it'll never get worse than this. We have to stop thinking that way, folks. I mean, here's a guy, just because he was a Catholic, really very mainstream Catholic views on marriage, that got banned from selling his fruits and vegetables at a farmer's market. You want to talk about ludicrous and ridiculous overstep of a government agency, okay? We can't be surprised anymore. In fact, what I'm coming to realize, and I'm going to share some more of this in the next segment as we come up, I'm coming to realize that not only is the idea that, it could, a normal, rational, decent human being just could not imagine that kind of ludicrousness. You know what I'm saying? That ridiculousness that some of these government officials and people in charge are pursuing, these bureaucrats and politicians and whatever, the woke mentality, whatever you want to call it, the woke mind virus, they're like a beehive, they all do what the queen bee says, you know what I mean? There's no independent thought, it seems like, amongst any of them. If you ever watch Star Trek, that movie in the Borg, you would know what I'm talking about. If you just can't, most people, normal people can't relate to that. They just can't imagine that kind of lack of independent thinking and people actually going along with this. But folks, here's what we got to realize. It's actually worse than we thought. And we have to come to terms with that before we can fix it. Stay tuned in the next segment and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Stay tuned for more common sense from Ferenc. For more information, contact Ferenc at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth. Want more information? Contact Ferenc at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ferenc Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ferenc. So, as I was leading up in the last segment, those of us who have lived, I would consider, relatively normal lives, okay? And I'm discussing the vast majority of the people. Easily 80, if not 90% of Americans fit under this category. There's normal, decent, well-meaning people. No, we're not perfect. Yes, we all have our weaknesses. Yes, we can do bad things sometimes because we are human, okay? That happens. But in general, we mean well. We try to do well. We just, for the most part, want to live our lives, raise our families, build our businesses or careers, whatever it may be. Leave us alone. Leave us the hell alone, right? I mean, that's just what it boils down to. That's where most people really are. And we don't get that involved in, politics is not our life. We're not worried about controlling other people and all those kinds of things. Unfortunately, we have a group of folks who don't think that way and have been slowly, systematically, for the last several decades, have been building and building on their worldview, which is dramatically different than what I just described as the majority of folks who are just, typical, regular, average, everyday Americans, right? Some are more wealthy than others, doesn't matter. You just have that, what would have been considered a normal attitude just even a few years ago. It still is, by the way. It's just the silent majority is not as loud as the loud, crazy minority, okay? But here's some things I'm going to share with you that are absolutely true. I mean, it's actually, the people have said this stuff, and it makes you shake your head. There's a World Economic Forum advisor that deems fewer English babies is good news for the planet. If I had said that even a couple of years ago, most of you would have thought I was nuts. But she is actually an Oxford academic, a World Economic Forum advisor, and she recently expressed joy, calling the prospect of fewer English babies a good thing. They've been at a 2-decade low recently. And of course, America has seen relative, similar fertility rates plummet. in recent years, particularly since COVID, okay? And when pressed, so she was asked, Sarah Harper is her name. She's the director of Oxford Institute of Population Aging. She said, fewer English babies are good for our planet. And the reason that she says it's good for them is that the Western people, okay, they basically they're bad for the environment because they're carbon polluters. They basically it's that simple. And a lot of people, it's actually happening. There is a movement of people not having children due to fears over climate change, and is impacting fertility rates quicker than almost any other previous trend out there. Like I said, new human beings, at least from a Western societies, let's put it that way, bring with them the guarantee of carbon emissions. And it isn't just her that's saying this stuff. There's anti-human American biologist Paul Ehrlich, the Club of Rome. Ted Turner has said these kinds of things. There's a number of other groups like this. A lot of them, this anti-human propaganda has been parroted by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Okay, I mean, it's kind of rampant in that world, that what you would call, they think of themselves as elites. I don't think they are, but that they think themselves as that. They think it's bad for the planet because they're like they said, the guarantee of carbon emitters. Okay, so what it boils down to is they have this decarbonization. The World Economic Forum has been put out a paper stating if it was up to them, they would prefer to see half a billion people on planet Earth total, instead of the 7 or 8 billion there are now, something like that. Folks, do you understand that if they got their way, do you realize what kind of chaos and human carnage would be involved to having the world's population be reduced by that much? I mean, you're talking about wars, famines. I mean, every type of disaster, natural, human, man-made disaster you could think of. And by the way, which would also be horrible for the environment. War is terrible for environment, okay? That's what these people don't think about or don't realize. But this decarbonization agenda, I thought about this a minute. This is something I haven't had anybody bring up yet. And like I said, those of you who listen to the show know I think about things and stuff comes to me, and I believe some of it is divinely inspired because I do pray and ask for inspiration, and occasionally I get an inspiration. I think I've received one here, and it's another one, and it's this. Carbon-based life forms is what we are. In other words, carbon is life. We are a carbon-based life form, plain and simple. So are all animals. So when you are against carbon, you are anti-human. You're anti-animal. The World Economic Forum and all these things, like I said, these people pushing this green energy push are anti-human. That's the reality. And unless you've been under a rock, you've heard about this Maui fire. It really literally is now, obviously, the worst fire in probably U.S. history. Okay, more people have been killed as a result of this fire, and it really is government incompetence and this decarbonization agenda. And here's what I mean. I'm putting the two together, and I think you're going to understand why. You're going to understand why in a minute. So first thing that happened really seems like apparently the cause was power lines that went down that caused fires, caused some brush to catch fire, and that's what led to the fire, along with high winds and all that, which of course contributed to the fire damage and the speed and how it moved and all that kind of stuff. But here's the reality of things. Hawaiian Electric, which supplies 95% of electricity to Hawaii, well, it's come out now that they spent almost all of their safety budget on green energy initiatives. Now, what is their safety budget? Much of that was cleaning out brush and debris around power lines to prevent fires, wildfires like this. In other words, they diverted the money that was set aside for safety, instead pursue this green energy agenda. That really comes down to government incompetence and decarbonization, okay? Because they knew that if they didn't pursue these safety procedures, wildfires would be much more likely and be much worse. I mean, if you don't clear the brush, you're more likely going to have a wildfire. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure that out. Plus, here's another piece that doesn't make any sense. Again, lack of safety and incompetence. Apparently, there were some power lines down, some of them for as long as 10 hours, and Hawaiian Electric did not shut off the power to those down power lines. So they were live, which also would have contributed to sparking fires. Again, not rocket science. And they also stating now part of the reason why so many people died in Lahaina is that the police were blocking the roads because of the downed live power lines. You couldn't get out. Again, more government incompetence. But it goes beyond that. So apparently, their system is if you have an emergency and you need more water, that you have to get approval from this government agency or this government official. Now, first of all, straight off the bat, that is just completely and totally ridiculous. You have a water emergency. Why do you have to get an approval from a government official to get that water? That's just stupid. I'm sorry. That's incompetence straight up. But then on top of that, this official denied the request for the water while people were dying and burning, literally burning alive. Then it comes out even further that this official, this water official, his name is Calio Manuel. He's a state water official. He was more concerned about water equity as a fire raged. He delayed it for like 5 hours. Apparently, he believes that water is a deity or a pagan god and should not be used. In other words, he would rather have water running in streams and putting out a fire. He would rather have children burned to a crisp than use the water. Now, he's been reassigned. He hasn't even lost his job. My opinion is he should be tried for murder. I know that sounds strong, but I believe anything less than that would be completely unjust. That is true government incompetence. Now, again, I'm not done. It gets worse. Let me ask one other question. Lahaina, I've been there. Beautiful, used to be beautiful city, or beautiful town, Hawaiian town, lots of history and all that. It happens to be right by the ocean. You had fire trucks there, firefighters, and I'm not blaming the firefighters because they were the few government employees that were actually trying to do something good. But why didn't anybody think about pumping water from the ocean? They have those I'm not a fireman, but those fire trucks, a fire pumping truck could pump water from just about anywhere. Why not pull it from the ocean? It's right there. Instead of waiting for the fire for 5 hours to get approval. And of course, this fire is raging on. People are dying, literally. I haven't heard anybody ask that question. I'd like to see an answer to that one. But bottom line is the government response was slow or non-existent. And now, to add insult on injury, the federal assistance, at last I heard, is they're giving out $700 per person in emergency assistance. And they announced that on the same day, I shared this last week's show, on the same day that they gave $200 million to Ukraine. Where are their priorities? Do they even care about you? They don't care about Americans. They care about their agenda. And that's why these things I'm sharing with you, there's some lessons to be learned from this. And I'm going to strongly encourage you to stay tuned in the next segment because I'm going to share what those lessons are. And like I said, in the meantime, if you want help, assistance, how to navigate all this chaos, I believe that economically it's going to get worse, far worse before it gets better. Contact me. I'd love to help you. But stay tuned. I'm going to share with you the lessons that need to be learned, this decarbonization agenda and government incompetence.
Stay tuned for more common sense from Ferenc. For more information, contact Ferenc at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth. Want more information? Contact Ferenc at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ferenc Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ferenc. So I'm going to finish up on this thought I was sharing in the last segment where we have this decarbonization agenda. Green energy push. By the way, don't forget, we are carbon-based life forms, folks. So if you're against using fossil fuels and you're against all this stuff, You're also anti-human because, again, higher energy costs hurt poor people more than anyone. So if you're for higher energy costs, you're against poor people. Full period. Stop. Plain and simple. There's no other two ways about it. But if we go to this Maui disaster, apparently it's probably the worst one in American fire disaster in American history, before it's all said and done. But the level of incompetence and non-caring is beyond the pale. The Hawaiian Electric, who provides the electricity for Hawaii, diverted most of their safety money, in other words, cutting back brush and things like that from their power lines, to green energy incentives. Boy, that's done a lot of people any good, right? They then, when the power lines went down because of high winds, they didn't shut them down for 10 hours. They had live power lines on the ground. The police had to prevent people from leaving town because there was live power lines on the ground. Then they needed water to put out the fire, and they had a protocol that they had to get approval from a government official to get water. And that's just ridiculous. That's incompetence beyond incompetence. And they didn't get that for 5 hours because the official apparently he likes water more than saving people. That's his words, in essence, his words. He believes water is like a pagan god, I guess. The guy hadn't even lost his job. Again, he tried for murder. I said that in the last statement. I firmly believe that. But it goes on. They didn't use the ocean. Gosh, there's unlimited water source right there. Okay, why not? $700 in emergency response money for these poor people that lost everything. Some of them, their family members, kids, all of it. And you give $200 million to Ukraine. I'm sorry. It took then Biden first response was no comment. The famous people asking, press were asking him about what about this Maui thing, and his first comments were no comment because he was on vacation. Took 2 vacations and then 13 days later showed up. Does he care? Folks, no. Here's the lessons. Do not, and I repeat, do not count on the government to help or save you. They don't care. I think Biden proved that abundantly, and all these other actions have done so also. My hope is enough people start waking up to that, including these Democrats who voted for these people, predominantly in Hawaii's Democrat, right? Maybe this might wake them up. That's my hope. That's the silver lining, hopefully, maybe. But here's your lessons. Do not count on the government. They will not be there when you need them. Then they don't care, folks. I don't care what they say. Some of the previous politicians and presidents have been good at faking it, but they don't care. Biden's just not as good as faking it as some of the others were. Secondly, not all problems are caused by politics, but this one was. The Maui fire is man-caused disaster, man-made disaster, plain and simple, if you just look at the facts. 3, Democrats don't have to be competent. They only have to agree with the agenda. You don't believe me? Look at Biden. Look at Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania. Guy had a stroke, and they still elected him to be senator. He was not fit for office. I'm sorry, I don't care how you cut it. He got voted in against, whether you like Dr. Oz or not. Certainly Dr. Oz was far more competent. No one could argue that. A smart guy against a guy who just had a stroke. Look, nothing against the guy who had the stroke, but he's not ready for the job. You don't vote him in to be a U.S. senator. Nearly every Democrat votes the same way on every bill. It's a huge issue when even one of them or 2 of them deviate. Do you remember when Senator Manchin and Sinema would not agree to the massive Democratic spending bill and eliminating the Senate filibuster so they could pass it? They were harassed and harassed. In fact, Sinema was harassed so much she's now become an independent. Now, of course, it's in name only because she still votes with the Democrats over 90% of the time. But the reality is they don't kowtow to anyone not following the party line. You have to follow the party line to be a Democrat. It's not like it used to be. People that are voting for Democrats are not voting for what used to be the classic liberal Democrat. It's not the same. Both parties have incompetence. I'm not going to say they don't. Republicans have plenty of incompetence also. But Democrats are full of people who agree and actively pursue this decarbonization agenda. Remember it, folks. We're carbon-based life forms. It's a anti-human stance. What you need to understand, folks, is this is pure and unadulterated evil. It's anti-human. This is literally a case of we're fighting. If you really want to understand it, so many people, I stated earlier, good, common, decent folk, they're not perfect, but they try to lead a decent life, and they just can't relate to this. Folks, what you need to understand and wake up to, this is evil. We are staring evil in the face, folks, and the only time evil can triumph is when good men do nothing. We have many low information or misinformed people that need to wake up that do vote Democrat still, okay? And what they do is we need to educate. Our goal is simple. We need to educate some of them. We don't need all of them. I've said this repeatedly. We only need 51%. And depending who you are and what you believe in happened in the last few elections, we may need 55%, okay? But the bottom line is we need a majority of voters, okay, Americans, to understand. And there is a majority. That's the thing. You are in the majority if you get this. You just need to be more open and vocal about it. And these people, we just got to get enough of these people. It's just a few. We just need a handful out of 100, literally, to realize the government incompetence and decarbonization agenda has real consequences to human life. Hopefully they can put the two together. That's what I'm trying to understand, or trying to share and help people understand. Maui was a man-made disaster. The government caused it, and the response made it worse. You could say the same thing about COVID, couldn't you? Think about that a minute. What happens, and here's the big question I have. This is what people need to realize and understand and wake up to. What happens when another disaster occurs? What if a major war breaks out? Are you really going to trust this current group of incompetent government officials to make things better? Are they going to be there to take care of you or make things better? No. Based on their track record and their agenda, they're very much likely to make matters worse, not better. That's my point. That's the key thing, the key point people need to understand. You see, Obama was right. He said elections do have consequences, and he was corrected that. Unfortunately, many people burned to death in Maui, including children, because of those people in charge of both the state and federal government levels. You know, this disaster could have been minimized or even likely avoided if just some basic common sense had reigned instead of these crazy agendas, and they would just do their freaking job. Here's my hope. Here's my prayer. Here's what I hope to see happen as a result of this Maui disaster, and it's this. I only hope Hawaiians, and Americans for that matter, learn this lesson before it's too late and more people die unnecessarily. You see, government incompetence can lead to literally, and I mean literally, people dying. We saw that in Maui and Lahaina, Maui. What's going to happen next? Do you trust the government? Do you trust our current officials? Do you trust our current bureaucracy, the unelected officials? I think in many cases, they're far worse because they have little or no accountability. And we've seen through actions like with COVID, for example, the actions that the government took, forcing the mask mandates and all these kinds of actions that they did, and now coming out that the science is proven. And the facts are that many of them lied, okay? That's the bottom line, okay? I mean, to deny that is to deny the facts, deny science, deny everything. And the latest I heard is they're trying to bring this back and the mask mandates back. Here's the best thing we can do as Americans. Civil disobedience. You know, it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. You know, the boy cried wolf and fooled the villagers. And he fooled them once, he fooled them twice, and after a while they just stopped listening. That's what we need to do, okay? Because the reality is these are not people that are trustworthy. What we need to do is remove them, but until we can't trust them. We can't listen to them. They do not have our best interests in mind. They're not doing their jobs. Most part, they're either enriching themselves or they have an agenda that does not include you or me. It's not for the benefit of the average American. It's for the benefit of themselves or a few of their tight circle. I saw this other thing. I'll just share this too. There was I think New York Times, I believe it is, article came out that it would be better if we just didn't have elections at all. It was somebody was asking Alan Dershowitz, and not that I agree with him. He's very much a liberal, but at least he's one of the few honest, old school liberals out there. And the question was asked to him about this no more elections, and he said, "You're familiar with that crowd. Do you think they would go for this?" He goes, "Oh yeah, absolutely. They think they know better than you and I. They truly do. These people are evil. These people are looking out for their own best interests as oligarchy. They want to stay in control and in power. It's plain and simple. It's no more complicated than that. We need enough people to recognize that, realize that, and unfortunately many of them are in the Democratic Party. Not all, but many. We have some rhinos too that fall into that category. And the key is this next election cycle, enough people have to be educated to vote the bums out, get rid of them, and let's get some people that will actually really represent us. That's the solution. Until that happens, we're going to have to weather the storm. I've stated this repeatedly. Economically, it's very likely to get worse before it gets better. Likely far worse. The leading economic indicators are all pointing to that way. Some, again, have never been wrong, and some are sending stronger signals than they ever have. Don't ignore it. Reduce your market risk. Reduce your tax liability. Guarantee some of your portfolio at least. Diversify. Create positive arbitrage. Protect yourself. Hunker down the hatches, batten down the hatches until this storm blows over. This economic storm that's coming blows over. I can't say this strong enough. If you want help on that, contact me. I'd love to help you. And as always, stay tuned to the next week's show. And as long as it's on our money, in God we trust.
Listen Tuesdays at noon and Saturdays at 1 to the Your Personal Bank Show for more information. Contact Ferenc at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information. The presenter and guests of this program do not engage in legal, accounting, or tax advice. Professional advice regarding your situation should be sought if required. Some products discussed may have limitations and not be available in all states. Excessive unpaid loans may affect performance. Distributions may become taxable if not managed properly. Replacements may not be suitable for everyone. There may be charges when replacing coverage. Dividend rates and bank line of credit rates may change. For current rates, contact Ferenc at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. Again, that's 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com.